Um, Hello and welcome to another Stump the Spread edition of Poker Strategy. I apologize if I seem a little bored of this topic. I've done this video about 4 times and it has not worked. So hopefully this is the lucky shot that works. Anyway, what we're going to discuss here is good poker, the concept of good poker. And basically what it is it's just a way to think about the game of poker. It's a pretty level 1 basic thought process we're going to go through and basically just try to get you to think better about the game, and if you want to get more competitive about it, this is the way to go. There's also a lot of misconceptions about how you go about playing good poker. We're going to nail those. Let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to teach you what good poker is. We're going to tell you what the common misconceptions are, how to dispel the myths of poker, go through some mental errors that are going to prevent you from playing good poker, and basically just move on to playing good poker. I mean, that's what this video is about. So what is the definition of this good poker concept that I've been talking about? Well, basically, every poker decision that we're involved in, it has 2 main simple parts. And the first part is going to be making assumptions about your opponent. And these assumptions are going to be based on the current playing habits of your opponent, past experience with him. If you have Poker Tracker, HUD stats, Hold'em Manager, HUD stats, those are going to be huge for you. And also the ranges that we can apply to this opponent, and that's probably the most important factor, is putting them on a correct hand range. And once we make all these assumptions, we figure out, a relatively accurate, at least in our mind, assumption, then we can go about choosing the correct line, the correct way to play our hand, which has the highest success rate against our assumptions. And that is the bread and butter of good poker right there. That is the foundation that we want to work on. And if you can start thinking about the game like this, your win rate's going to go up. You're going to play a lot better, and you're going to make a lot better moves. Let's get into the common misconceptions. The biggest one is that if you play a hand the same way every time, it's correct. You raise with pocket 9s. That's the example we're going to use here. If you raise with pocket 9s 100% of the time, every time you pick up pocket 9s, you raise. And this is what's called a generalized rule. That's, someone said, hey, if you raise with pocket 9s every time, it's going to be profitable. It's the right play. It's the correct play. And if we say, well, of course this can't always be the correct play. You can't just always assume this is the correct play. But let's say it wins, it's the correct play 70% of the time. 70% of the time, it is the right play to make when you get pocket 9s. And so that's pretty good. That's a pretty good rate of return there, 70%, you're right 70% of the time. That's good for beginners. That's good for, the basic people. That's good to start off with. But when you really want to start getting competitive with this game, you really wanted to start taking your game to the next level, you're going to have to account for that 30% that 30% that you're losing. And once you can start accounting for that 30%, when you can pick up ways to see that, hey, pocket 9s isn't the correct way to play this, I have to get away from it here, I should probably limp here, when you can start accounting for that 30%, that's when your game's gonna just soar. You're gonna win way more money, and if you just apply that concept to all these general rules that you might be using, if you just dispel all those and you start playing the situation, the player, the hand, you're gonna be way better off. And so that's probably the biggest misconception. Another slight myth of poker would be the fundamental theorem of poker. It was written by David Skolansky. I think it appears in his Theory of Poker book. Maybe, I don't know. I think that's the book it is. He's written a million of them, but it's been reproduced a million times. And basically what it says is that every time you play a hand differently than if your opponent could see your hand, you benefit. And every time you play a hand the way you would if your opponent could see your hand, then your opponent's going to benefit. And the real truth to this is that it's not really a theorem of how to play the game. It's more a theorem of what poker is all about, as like an economic system. If you play this way, you're going to play way too tricky. You're going to get badly beaten a lot. You're going to be slow playing all the time. You're going to become easier to read. You don't want to play like this every time. And you just got to remember that when thinking about this theorem of poker. Poker's an incomplete game. It's a game of incomplete info. You can't see your opponent's cards. Your opponents can't see your cards. So just remember that when thinking about poker. Fundamental theorem of poker. Good way to think about the game as a whole, but not a good way to play the game. And now let's get into some assumptions of playing, like putting your opponents on a hand. So one of the mistakes that people make with assumptions is that instead of trying to put their opponent on like a range or try to narrow down what their opponent has to a couple, like 10 hands, like nines plus, ace queen, ace king. Instead of making those kind of reads, people will try to put people on way too narrow of a hand. They try to put them on the actual hand. They raise from middle position and a guy 3-bets on the button. And they say, well, shit, he has to have aces. There's no other hand he would 3-bet here. And I'm sure there might be opponents out there. There might be some nits out there. If it's a nit, hell yeah, you can fold. That's fine. But you don't want to be making that assumption very often. What you need to do is put your opponent on a range based on what they've done before and based on what they're doing now. So, like, with that 3-bet example, if you see, like, if you have Poker Tracker running and you see, hey, his 3-bet range is like 17% and I've only played 60 hands with him, well, chances are he probably doesn't have aces here. And if you've seen in the past at this table that he's 3-bet on the button before, well, he's probably just 3-betting in position there, and you can shove it up his ass with those nines. Totally cool. So see how your game evolves when you start thinking of poker like this? Anyway, when we put our opponent on a range, we can play against that range and the range of possible actions. That's the key right there. So anyways, I'm just going to touch on this concept of continuous ranges just real briefly.